I'm introducing myself. I'm Jerry Alford. I am one of the farming advisors at the Soil Association, advising farmers on a wide range of areas. One of the projects that we're involved with quite heavily is innovative farmers. Innovative farmers is, for those who don't know, farmer-led research. So we work towards supporting peer-to-peer learning and experimentation. The way that we work is farmers and producers set the priorities. It is supported by respected researchers, and we try to provide practical, intuitive on-farm research and work. The way it works is by having multiple trialists, sharing the risk, the investment, and it amplifies the learning. We also support this with a small grant scheme of up to £10,000. Innovative Farmers itself is a partnership between the Prince of Wales Charitable Foundation, Duchy Originals, Soil Association, Organic Research Centre, Innovative for Agriculture, and LEAF. Just to give you a broad overview of the sort of trials that we get involved with, we have and are supporting trials at the moment on diverse leys. We've got a current trial looking at cover crops sown into standing crops using a sprayer. We've done trials with intercropping. We've got an existing trial looking at potato trap crops. We have finished, but still looking at the alternatives to glyphosate for terminating cover crops, and bearing in mind that with the frost that we've had today in the UK, the use of a roller was very effective. We've developed a lone worker safety app, and all of these trials, reports, good and bad, failures and successes, are reported through the press and via our website, which is innovativefarmers.org. For those who are interested, there is a new field lab journal that's just been released today. It's available as a download from the virtual exhibition area of Oxford Real Farming Conference. The session today is titled very, very provocatively, Organic No-Till with Living Mulches, the Holy Grail for Organic Arable. And what we're going to do is just talk through a background and to explain a little bit about the organic farming, arable farming, and the living mulch trial. And then we have two of the farmers involved, which is an organic and a non-organic farmer, as to why they're involved and interested in living mulches. And then we also have, fortunately, the experience of a farmer in Europe already working with living mulches in an organic situation. And so, looking at this from an organic point of view, as an organic advisor, it's a common conversation that I have. Organic farms, and be honest, many mixed farms have a diverse rotation with nutrient return, and they can show increased soil organic matter despite using ploughs and cultivation. Our rotations are based around nutrient recycling, as well as pest and weed reduction. And although within our organic rotations, there may be more profitable short-term strategies, what we know is these rotations have been proven to give long-term benefits. However, there is research, the DOK trials at Fibble in Switzerland have shown that increased soil organic matter from the organic systems, and equally I was listening into the Rodale talk on one of the other sessions earlier on. And we've also know of a negative influence of artificials and fertilizers and chemicals on soil biology. Within organic farming, weeds are probably the biggest worry we have. And everyone knows the phrase from old, 1 year's weeds leads to 7 years weeding. We tend to use plough-based systems in the UK, and these have seemed to be given best weed control, but we do acknowledge that it can lead to loss of soil organic matter and soil biology, and it also does keep on bringing more weeds to the surface. However, we need to remember that all herbicides of any type are prohibited in organic, and so we do not have that chemical option. So the question we have is there a different system which minimizes weeds germinating and still provide a suitable seed bed? The second issue within organic is fertility. Artificial fertilizers, again, are prohibited in organic farming. Fertility in the rotation comes from livestock manures, from compost and fixation by legumes, as well as green manures and cover crops in appropriate places. Legumes are our best free source of nitrogen. Pulses in the rotation, clovers in the fertility phase. And for many people, we revert back to the views of Sir Robert Howard in 1940, and it's 80 years ago. Maintaining high levels of humus is essential for a farming system. Organic no-till is a practice, and here we are talking specifically about no-till, which is minimal cultivation. So we're not even talking low-level scratching the surface. It is literally just planting the seed in a strip. Pasture cropping, a practice from Australia particularly, where a combinable crop is drilled into a growing grass ley, works with the split seasons they have. Use of crimper rollers, again, the Rodale practice. The use of frost tender cover crop mixtures, so that if we can guarantee a frost, the cover crop is killed and the next combinable crop is ability to grow through. Intercropping using short season annuals. Sequential cropping, the use of, for example, inter-row cultivators and drills, so that we grow a second crop into. And also, obviously, permaculture. As organic farmers, we've been looking at all of these things. But what we're also asking is, can we take other ideas from the conventional sector? We already know there's a move towards a no-till, but by using min-till as the intermediate practice. This is the background to why we set up the Innovative Farmers Living Mulch. And from an organic farming point of view, we see that fertility and weeds are the two most limit yield. We came up with the question is really, can we combine the weed mulching effect and nitrogen fixing of perennial clover in the combinable crop and not have or accept the possible negative effects of competition for space, but still produce an economically viable crop? During the course of all these conversations, it became interesting that for different reasons, non-organic farmers were asking exactly the same question. And this becomes one of the principles behind the way Innovative Farmers works, that farmers suggest the proposals, we put together a trial on that. So the Living Mulch trial has been set up with 6 farmers running 7 trial plots, which have a control and test areas. They have a simple tramline trial, and Dominic Amos of ORFC is overseeing the trial, so we have a proper researcher. Within the group, there are organic and non-organic farmers, and one does both, and they're in neighbouring fields, which is fascinating for some of the results we've already found.
The sound is very intermittent. I just thought I'd better say that because everybody is saying it on the chat.
I'm sorry.
It's even worse now.
It's even worse now. My headphones back on properly.
Normally, it's better if you turn off your video when you're speaking.
My video, is it on? Yeah, I'll try that. Okay, so there are organic and non-organic farmers. Is that better? And one has both in neighbouring fields. The non-organic farmers are all no-till. The organic farmers are dabbling in min and no-till to reduce cultivations. The whole trial is coordinated by Paul Hill from AHDB. And in addition, there's a wider range of interesting farmers in the background who have, by accident or design, tried living mulches or no-till organic. Throughout the development of the trial, there have been various areas of debate. First of all, clover varieties, what should we be using? What we've chosen are Aberras and Aberpearl, which are small leaf clover and small to medium clover, because we didn't want varieties that would grow tall to interfere with harvesting. The drill, great debates over whether we should be using strip till or disc drills, and also debates about whether we should be looking for 100% ground cover or just clover strips. Other debates about the management of clover to control the growth and release of fertility, such as livestock, inter-row mowers and crimpers, or chemical and fertilizers as possible control methods for the conventional farmers. We've also discussed crop choices, timing of treatments, drilling dates, etc., and also the impact on rotations. I'm not going to go into more details because a lot of this will be covered through the following speakers.
I'm sorry, Jerry.
Yep.
Could you please increase the volume if possible?
I'm up to 100%. Is that done?
It seems better, thank you.
Is that better? Okay. So I hope everyone's managed to hear some of what I've been saying. Within the Living Mulch trial, we've been supported, as well as through the Innovative Farmers normal funding. We've also had sponsorship from Organic Arable, the Organic Grain Marketing Co-op, and seed was supplied by Cotswold Seeds. In addition, as part of another EU project that the Soil Association is part of, reduced cultivation and cover crops are two of the FAB practices as the Fabulous Farming Programme. Okay, so the question is living mulches and why? And for this, we have input now from Clive Bailye, who will explain who he is and what he is, and is part of the trial. So Clive, I'll hand over to you.
Hi, can you hear me okay, Gary? Is that working? Hello?
That's good.
Yeah.
Right, I just start some slides, if you bear with me a second. So, right, hopefully you can see that. So yeah, my name's Clive Bailye, and we're not an organic farmer. We farm combinable crops at scale near Lichfield, which is Staffordshire, right in the centre, in the Midlands of the United Kingdom. We're not organic, but we do farm under a regenerative agriculture, zero-till conservation ag type system, whatever you want to call it. So kind of I see it somewhat of a halfway house.
I'm very sorry, Clive, we don't see you.
You don't see my screen?
No screen.
No,
up. No
don't see you.
Hang on a second, let me try again with the screen share. Share screen. Yes. Sharing screens, yeah.
Great.
Do you see that now?
Yep.
Thank you.
Can everyone see that now, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So yeah, as I say, we've been regenerative agriculture, zero-till, conservation ag, whatever label you want to give that no-tillage system for 15 years now. So I see it as a bit of a halfway house, a step towards organic, and yeah, with a big focus on the soil and soil carbon sequestration. So, but we have significantly, although not organic, this has led to significant reductions in our use of synthetic inputs. We're using less synthetic fertilizers, less crop protection products, and we've actually managed to cut out one group of crop protection products, the insecticides and pyrethroid type products. We're now 10 years or 11 years since we last used one on the whole farm. That's what we found through this improvement in soil health and the greater diversity. I was interested in this whole project because for me, the thing that stops me becoming an organic farmer is that I would need to start cultivating again, which would affect my fixed cost structure badly. So for me, organic zero-till is the holy grail of agriculture. I don't want to go back to cultivation and the cost and complexities and the downsides to my soil that can bring. I want to keep the advantages of zero-till, but I would love to be able to stop using those synthetic inputs altogether because they cost me money. So this is kind of the way we tend to farm now. We're growing, we're direct drilling with low disturbance drilling machinery, usually into a green cover crop with absolute minimal soil disturbance, and that's how we were establishing our beans last year, I think it was now. The principles of this system, I'm sure you're familiar, but basically are minimal soil disturbance through mechanical means, so no tillage, direct seeding, maintaining a permanent soil organic cover, a soil armor as the Americans call it, which ties in well with this living mulch, because that really does give us a permanent soil cover that reduces our water losses, which on light soils can be very influential on yields. So we're trying to keep at least that 30% of the ground covered at all times, and wider species diversification through more diverse rotations, companion cropping, relay cropping, all those kind of techniques that we can talk about. And again, that ties into the idea with the living mulch of not just growing a monoculture of a field of wheat or a field of beans, the idea that we'd have the clover growing alongside the cash crop kind of as a companion and giving more diversification to that soil biology. It's all about this really for me, increasing water and sunlight to give us that better plant growth. So my whole farming system is based around maximising carbon capture. And this part, the soil food web, that keeping the soil disturbance low brings access to the soil food web and all the kind of the biology and fungi within that web that is able to feed my cash crops from mineral nutrition rather than relying on soluble and synthetic nutrition sources, which cost us money. So the lack of soil disturbance is all based around trying to help build the soil food web thrive, and then as a result, hopefully my cash crops will benefit from that. If I can just change to it, I've got a little bit of video. So we established our living mulch trial, or tried to establish our living mulch trial, should I say, this autumn. This last spring. We drilled it into row with our low disturbance disc drill into the wheat crop that had been established the following October, the previous October. This is when we were doing it. We're putting the clover mix, the mixtures that Jerry mentioned earlier, were being established into the growing wheat crop there. These are the clover seeds at the time, and we ended up. If I can find the picture, we rolled it in. It was very dry at the time, and that's the kind of result that we had. We can see that where the drill has established a seed. So far, I'm sad to say, it hasn't been a resounding success for us. We had a very dry season this year. Not after that was established, we had no rain for 90 days straight, and the clover didn't establish very well as a result of that. So far, my experience of this, although there's a lot to learn from that, and we're going to be doing the same again this year to get things going and putting some more clover in. It was a 4-hectare area that we had that across, but as yet, weather has been against us to actually get a good, thick living mulch, unlike others that are involved in the trial that we can all learn from. So if I stop sharing my screen, that's all in terms of my slides.
Okay, thank you,
I'll hand back to Jerry, if that's okay.
Yep, that's fine. Thank you, Clive. There's one particular question that's come up specifically based on that. Is this is from Brooder Marcy. Clive, are you using fungicides, or is there any particular reason why you cannot get rid of them?
Yes, we are using fungicides. I'm still a conventional farmer. I'm not selling as a premium organic kind of brand at all. The reason I feel that I need to still be using them is because of our use of synthetic nitrogen. I think that kind of exaggerates, creates the need. So I think if we can make this living mulch trial work and get a large proportion of our nitrogen, possibly all of our nitrogen for the plant from the clover, it will take away the need to use those fungicides. But whilst we're using synthetic N, we create our own problem in that we then need to use synthetic fungicides as well. And to just cover off the other group of protection products, really the herbicides, again, hopefully with the living mulch ground cover and regular inter-row mowing, when the equipment becomes available to do that, that mulch should hopefully act as a replacement for our herbicides. So I've already cut out the use of insecticides through our farming system already. If I can get away from the synthetic nitrogen, I'm fairly confident we won't need the fungicides. And if we've got that permanent ground cover from the clover mulch, we won't need the herbicides. At which point, if that all works and all those bits fall into place, we are producing organic cereals, no-till, the holy grail that we're looking for.
Great, thank you, Clive. Just to explain to everybody, if there are specific questions for the farmer based on what he's been saying, we'll hand direct, and if we just have a broader range of questions later on in the session, then that will allow us to keep moving forward. So thank you, Clive. We'll now hand over to Mark. Mark is an organic farmer, again, part of the trial, and it'll be fascinating to hear his comments on this as well. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Jerry. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can. Yeah, it's only me, I think.
Yes, we're not huge farmers. We're 450-acre farm in Shropshire, not very far away from Clive, but we have been organic for 20 years. It seems like an awfully long time ago in some ways, but in other ways not. We're learning all the time, and this trial is very much part of that learning and development process for our farm. The farm is like other organic farms in that we rely on diversity. We rely on all the same things that have already been mentioned, but of course we're all different. We have rotations which all include either herbal lays, sort of diverse herbal lays, or grass clover lays, or clover straight, but clover always in every rotation because that's what drives things along for us. We also have stock. We're a mixed farm, so we have Hereford beef cattle and Romney sheep, and the stock are very much part of the cropping system. It's not, that's the way it is in organic. Everything is very much complementary to everything else, and the stock are at the heart of the rotation, along with the grass and the clover that they consume. So very much a mixed system. We also have on the farm a green waste composting operation, which we started also 20 years ago when we were converting to organic. We did it then in readiness, in a way, to replace artificial P&K, which I was worrying about how we were going to manage without. As it's turned out, compost application is far, far more complex than that, of course, but it has supported the improvement in our soils. And it's supported our organic cropping for that period, for the 20 years. So it's the reason that we do it has sort of changed as knowledge has improved, but undeniably it's been an important part of what we do. The cropping includes a number of crops. Our biggest crop is actually oats. We grow oats, as many organic farmers do, because they're a very successful organic crop, reliable organic crop usually, for organic arable. Peas, I grow spring peas, which are a very difficult crop to grow organically, but they are our legume break, which we need. In addition to clover, we need a late rotation legume break. And peas are grown here for hobmadods, all for human consumption, and have been for quite a number of years. We've been on the journey with them. We also grow a large range of specialist milling crops, about 18 to 20 this year, including things like rye and spelt, for direct sale to millers and bakers. So we're trying to be more specialist, more interesting, and market more of our products directly and add value wherever we can. There are other things, but they tend to come and go from the rotations. All our lays are undersown. So the living mulch establishment was very familiar to us. We've been doing that for the entire period, the whole 20 years. We started undersowing on day one of organic conversion, and we still do it. We tend to undersow into spring cereals normally in May, either by broadcasting, well, always by broadcasting rather, but we've changed the method to be a little bit more accurate and precise. So the lays are established in the spring. So that then in turn becomes our fertility building lay. So we don't plough every year, but in common with many organic farmers, and the reason we're all sitting here is that we are well aware of the problems that ploughing and heavy cultivation causes, but we are frustrated and sort of feel stuck in that position where we plough for weed control, we plough to create soil hygiene in terms of weed and pest carryover, but in ploughing we regenerate more weeds, so we germinate more weeds. So we're sort of stuck in the catch-22 and have been for 20 years. I would honestly say I don't think our weed levels are any lower than they were 20 years ago, which is not something I'm proud of, but it is a fact. We are holding our own, I would say, against weeds, and certainly not making the progress, which is another reason I'm so interested in this. Despite the fact that we do plough quite a lot, up to 4 years out of 5, and we do cultivate quite a lot also, I'm proud of the fact that we have improved our soils enormously over the 20 years. The complex rotations, the cover cropping, the grass and the clover, the lack of any synthetics, obviously fertilizers or chemicals for 20 years, the livestock and the compost, and probably a load of other things that we don't even know what we're doing, have contributed to much improved soil. Our organic matter levels here are about 5% across the whole farm now. So I don't have proper baseline levels, but I'm confident that they're substantially improved on what they were. And we see that our soils are much more workable, they are more resilient, they take water a lot better, they generally perform a lot better than the neighbouring farms' soils do that are still in a conventional non-regenerative system. So we tried reducing cultivations. We have, with some success, although I be honest, I had found that if we don't plough, we need to cultivate so much that arguably we would be doing less damage if we ploughed at times. So again, frustrated in that feeling of being stuck there. And it was hard to see how we were ever going to get beyond that. And I think only 2 or 3 years ago, I felt that probably our destiny was to be stuck there. The living mulch idea is relatively new to us. and I'm delighted to be a part of it. We have 2 fields involved this year. And they are a field of now sown winter oats and winter rye. The seed, as we saw the mix earlier on, the 70% micro clover seed was undersown with our Technete applicator rather than broadcaster air seeder in May, so in early May 2020. One field was in spring wheat and the other was in winter wheat. The winter wheat field was more advanced, obviously, in May, and I was more pessimistic that that would work well. The spring wheat was a nice open young crop of spring wheat, so perfect, rather like the shots of Clive's sowing there. Ours looked similar on the day, except with more weeds. We had terrible weather, as was mentioned, drought this summer, and establishment was poor, really poor and really affected. So I'm delighted with where we've got to in the end. We had clover in our stubbles behind the combine. We followed that with the sheep, as was the plan. So the sheep grazed the clover right back as hard as possible from mid to late October. And then we drilled, direct drilled our new crops, the cereal crops, which are winter rye and winter oats, into those clover lays, or what was left of it, in late October, just 2020. I used 2 drills. We were, as Jerry mentioned, the dilemma between tine drills and disc drills. We used a Horsch Pronto disc drill with no cultivation down, so just the seeding discs at the back, and also had a demo of the Simtech TSEM tine drill. So we have divided our trial up now, and we have within it a trial of disc versus tine as well. I think, Jerry, if you want to play my video now, this is a video that I took just last week, which sort of brings you right up to date.
Here's an update from very soggy Shropshire. This is our living mulch work here as part of the Innovative Farmers trial. This is a sort of trial within a trial, this one. This is buckwheat stubble, where the clover hasn't done at all well, so it's sort of turned into an allelopathic effect trial to see whether weed suppression from the buckwheat is adequate. It's rye growing there, direct drilled, in this case with horse drill. Quickly across is into the proper clover. A bit easier to see maybe that way. The sun's very bright. This is very good clover here. The white clover did very well, and undeniably the rye has got its work cut out here to compete with that. But it's there and it's up. Where the ground was flat, which is obviously a no-till essential, it's looking quite good. The control is looking very wet. Usually looks better than that, but it has rained all night last night. But the control here was drilled about a week or so later than the trial area, and very quickly across to our adjacent field, which is oats. Winter oats. We picked winter oats and winter rye, being the most vigorous of crops available to us. That's the control, which looks lovely, apart from the puddles, which I'll let it off. Mascani winter oats. And then that is the dividing line between no clover and clover. Oats looking really well here, to be honest. Early indications are that the oats maybe are a bit more appropriate as our winter cereal than the rye. Although the rye, you would imagine, once it got going, would be extremely dominant as well. This is the horse drill area, and then the final thing would be the Simtech trial, which is on a slightly different line, running that way. Both look very similar, but we have an order in for a Simtech, so I'm slightly biased now.
Thanks, Jerry. That's really where we're up to. This, as I said, only last week. So early indications are that it's hopeful. I'm hopeful now. I wouldn't say confident yet, but I've moved from pessimistic to hopeful. The oats particularly look good, look happy. Both drills seem to work. and we are going to have something to harvest. What the yield penalties will be is the big thing we don't know, but that's where we're up to. Thank you. Over to you, Jerry. You're muted.
Okay. Yep. Sorry, Mark. There's just one question specifically came up, is that whether did the sheep not eat the weeds, or would the sheep not eat the weeds? And I imagine clover, and because this Jane's sheep said they'd sheep preferentially graze docks and other weeds before the grasses. So actually, I suppose in a way, broader question, could we at this stage of the year use the sheep to control weeds and pests, weed species and the clover in order to try and improve the management of this? Is sheep a management tool that we have as well as this?
Possibly. Sheep certainly are part of one of the tools here, and undoubtedly the plan always was to graze the clover before drilling with sheep. Yeah, I'm thinking about that exactly, that exact thing now. It's dry-ish ground conditions. It's very hard frost today, but we haven't had much rain in the last few weeks, or last couple of weeks. Maybe there is a possibility of running maybe some small sheep, some lambs across, to try and knock that clover again. Whether they would selectively graze the clover, I don't think they'd graze oats particularly, but whether they would graze rye, I don't know. But I don't know whether I'm going to be brave enough, but it's certainly an idea.
Great. Okay, that's fine. There are a few more questions. We'll pick them up as we finish. Sorry for the people having a bit of sound trouble with me speaking. Thanks for that, Mark. Now, if I'd like to hand over to Nicolas. Nicolas is, we chatted beforehand. Twitter at the moment is getting an awful lot of very, very positive, very accurate criticism for the effect it's had on certain political situations. However, within the farming community, Twitter is a really, really good way in which we can share knowledge and experience and talk and learn, as are other forms of social media. I'm not on the other ones, I'm only on Twitter. Nicolas is someone that Mark has been following for some time, and I have invited him on the basis of the really, really useful stuff that he has been posting on his farming system on Twitter. So this is the way that we can use social media for positive benefits. So Nicolas, if I can hand over to you for your presentation and to talk about what it is you are doing in your farm.
Okay, can you hear me, everyone?
Yes, yes, I can hear you, Nicolas.
Okay, I'm trying to share my screen now.
Yep.
Is it working?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Nicolas Lefebvre. I'm speaking to you from West Romania. I think I am 2,000 kilometers southwest from southeast, sorry, from my fellows from UK. I want to share my little experience in growing cereals in organic, no-till, under living mulches. This is the topic of the day. I will start with a small presentation of the farm. The share screen is okay, Jerry?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I'm managing a farm for some investors. 1,600 hectares, compact estate, as you see on the upper map. It's a wall block, quite a square. Our soil are very heavy, 50% of clay, with low pH and quite high level of organic matter. Our average rainfall for 1 year is around 580 millimeters. We divide the whole estate in 40-hectare blocks, more or less. And upon the EU organic regulation, we have several other certification like the Bioland standard, Naturland, and BioSuisse organic. Meaning that the access to organic fertilizer is even more restricted than in EU Bio. All the equipment, range of machinery is set on a 9-meter CTF system, control traffic farming, and we don't have livestock on the farm. This is the rotation we start with in organic, very, very quickly. The green, the two green parts are the lace we used to use in the rotation. So 7 years of rotation, out of it only 1 year of spring crop, being soybean or sunflower. 3 years out of 7 of cereals, some winter peas, and then clover lace with or without rapeseed. We tried a lot of time to establish rapeseed together with clover, but we failed also a lot of time. So I consider we have 2 years of non-cash crop every 7, which is quite a lot, and which is my biggest concern on the profitability of the whole farm. And that this is mostly why I'm trying my best to integrate this lace into a cash crop pattern. So let's enter the subject. How do we set up the living mulch? As everyone does, I see Mark has a lot of experience with that. We broadcast it in the spring under first cereal. We made by ourselves a broadcaster on the front on 9 meter, and we use different equipment, but mostly the rotary hoe to ground a little bit the seeds. This is the last operation we do in the cereals around 25th of March. After hoeing, we used to hoe all the cereals because we plant at 25 centimeters between rows. So priority is on these fields, and priority for hoeing. And once hoeing, the next day, on the second day, we broadcast some white clover, 6 to 8 kilograms per hectare. Key of success genetics. I saw we use quite the same varieties of clover. Being in UK or here, we have the same standard in varieties. The first harvest of cereals is quite easy. The legumes stay very low, very discreet under the cereal, so there's no critical point in that. But the intercrop management is a little bit more crucial to be sure that we have a great condition to set up and to plant the second cereal. So this period, meaning between 15th of July and 1st of October, is a period where we have where we care maybe the most in the whole system. We have to stimulate the legume growth. We have to manage the straw, which are sometimes very big volumes. But the more critical point is to manage the volunteers without chemical and without a tillage system. So we use mostly these two implements. Down there you see it's a grid plane vertical tillage disc on which we can adjust the angles of the disc and then the aggressivity of the disc. But also, and maybe mostly, the Einbock Aerostar rotation. It's a kind of weeder brand, quite new on the market. They are there for maybe 5 years. In proper weeding, I think it's, I mean, I don't really like it because it's very aggressive. But in this kind of management, the aggressivity is an advantage. And it is very able to handle big volumes of straw, and the aggressivity allows to break some young weeds and some volunteers also if we get on time on the field. This is how the fields look, however, between the two crops. So we will realize 2-3 passes maybe in these summer months. We tried also another implement, free and multifunctional, because it's also reducing mice pressure a lot. Maybe it helps, and it's big. Maybe it helps to introduce and to bring back some microfungal and microbacteria we lost in the conventional part of the farm. So we'll see. We are running a trial on that, and we'll analyze some samples in the spring with and without sheep. Then comes the planting time. We use a tine seeder, a Horsch CO9 or air seeder, or the new ones are the sprinters, but it's all the same tines. I'm not searching for very precise and accurate depth and let's say job pass in the field. I prefer to have almost a look of a tillage pass, trying to make some room, to favorite some room and mineralization for the first pass, for the first stage of the cereal. And as we saw just before, we try to strongly wear the legume, because after that the regulation will be almost impossible. So my only tool to measure that is my hand. And on one hand, if I have one plant of clover on one hand area, for me it's enough. And if I really don't need more, so it means 50 to 70 plants of clover per square meter at planting time. We plant very early. These are the first field to be planted. To be sure, we have the most powerful plants in the spring after winter to start the drag race with the legume in the spring. So you can see in details the tine, the look of the field just after someone is unmute. The look of the field just after seeding. This is how it looks. And then the drag race begin. These are pictures of this autumn, just entering the winter, our white oats trial. Now in the spring, we come back once or twice with the same Iostar Einbock. We'll see if I can show you the job very quickly. So we pass once again to dig out weeds. Some volunteers still, we try to disturb the mice again. This is one of my biggest enemies in this technique. It is lightly regulating the clover, but it's not magical. I mean, you just break a few leaves and few stems, but it doesn't really stop the clover. But it's cheap and fast. It's very around 2 liters per hectare maximum. The machine is not using itself at all in our soil, so it's almost free to do. And I never hesitate to give a pass if I have a good condition.
It's from the office.
The wheat.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
The harvest, the second harvest. So we are on the second cereal now. This is how it looks. On the left, you have a wheat. On the right, some oats. And due to very dry condition in 2020, in the spring, we had a lot of competition on the water. But the good point was the clover stays very, very low. And we mostly straight cut everything. Only the spelt trial was swatted before. Because on this trial, I keep some alfalfa also. And alfalfa was as high as a spelt. It was possible to harvest it like that, but we have the equipment, and also after 48 hours of drying up on the fields, the grain were way more cleaner. It was very, very clean regarding the first trial we had on straight cutting. And it really eased the combine job. These are some pictures of 2018 trial on spelt, beginning with the very beginning of the spring, 9th of March. And you'll see that in this drag race, the cereals is always over the alfalfa. If it starts like that, it's almost, the situation is almost won until the end. You see always 19th of April, so 5 weeks after, spelt is still there. It was a quite old alfalfa, already 2 years old at planting time, when we plant the spelt. So quite good fertility already in this plot. And you will see until the 7th of June that spelt is going very well, but the strips you see always on the right is a strip I left without any cereals, and the alfalfa is very dirty. Where we have the mix of cereals and alfalfa, like you see on the left here, it's only these two. There's no room and no light for any other weeds. But if you leave the alfalfa alone, it starts to be very, very dirty, full of weeds. So the results were quite good. We speak about 3.5 tons per hectare under our climate and no fertilizer at all. It's a good performance. 3.5 in the mixed trial versus 2 tons in neighbor fields, all our field, but spelt after peas, which means also a good fertility, winter peas, but in the mix it performs better. So I don't want to say as conclusion that it was better, but at least we can do same production instead of just cereal standing alone. And as you see on the right picture, at harvest time, it's quite green. We have a lot of biomass to feed in the combine, but having almost 50-50% alfalfa and straw, I can see it's going quite okay in a combine. It's not impossible to harvest. I performed some samples, some soil trials, some soil samples, sorry, to take the fertility in my stripes with and without cereals. And what I saw is nitrogen is almost at the same level, having spelt into alfalfa or alfalfa alone. We take a few phosphorus instead with the spelt, and the potash was quite on the same level also. This brings me to the conclusion then that in my regenerative ley, it doesn't cost me much to try to put the cereals, because my first target to reload the fertility in the soil, this target is almost the same having or not a cereal. So it doesn't cost me much to try to direct seed some farm seeds of cereals into a ley. I just risk to lose some farm seeds, and that's all. But in 4 years of trial, I always harvested something from every field. Conclusion of this year, we were implementing on very large scale these techniques, meaning over 300 hectares. This very dry spring, as I said, a lot of competition on water. Yields on weeds were 60-65% from farm average, but 2% higher in protein. This is huge. We are turning on 13% of protein in classical technique. That means 15% on the living mulch fields. We never performed that high on protein. The oats are also quite okay, 65-70% regarding the normal fields when the cereal stand alone. So it's really acceptable. Almost free of weeds. So we have the effect of the 2 or 3 passes of the aerostar rotation, but there is some studies going on about the impact of some ground beetles eating wheat grain. I'm not a scientist. I never studied that, but looking at the population we have on the ground, this is, I think this is one of the explanation why these plots are quite free of weeds, annual weeds. Wheat and spelt to be preferred, yes, because of their stance, but also because of they are way more vigorous in the spring versus the oats. oats are starting very, very slowly. They are very, I used to say they are very lazy in the spring, and they start, the wheat is starting almost 15 days before the oats. So that's why oats for me is better at hosting clover seedlings and to be the first aerial. First of all, because it's a little bit later to be harvested, so it will give a little bit more time for the clover to develop under, to be a little bit stronger before the harvest, not to be crushed by the combine wheels. Also, oat straw in our condition is being digested by the soil faster than some wheat straw. And last but not least, it's easier after the second harvest. It's easier for me to take out some oat seeds from a wheat harvest than some wheat seeds from oat harvest. It's almost impossible to sort out, to take out the wheat from the oats with simple machineries. We use Arable, Race, and Ouya clover varieties. Ouya is a kind of polymorphic clover, and when it's standalone, it stays quite dwarf. But when you put it competing with some cereals, it will start to grow very, very high. So I'm focusing more on Arable, Race, and other varieties coming on our next trials. And then we have also the surprise at harvest after the first cleaning to get, depending on the fields, between 35 and 50 kilos of clover seed per hectare extra harvest. That means with 1 hectare harvested, we can plant back 6 to 8 hectares. So it's not negligible. It's got a nice surprise. I wasn't expecting that. What to do with this fertility that we created with these lays? I decided to destroy some of the fields, some of the clover we had for 18 months, and we planted some rapeseed this end of summer. And you see on the left on the NDVI image, the light green area was some wheat under classical tillage system, and the rest was some 2020 wheat under clover, living clover. I lose some yields on the wheat, but I'm pretty sure, and you can see on the right here, of the picture. This picture is from yesterday. On the right, the clover is way standing. Sorry, the rapeseed is standing way more better and looks much stronger due to the fertility. I think the loss I have on the wheat will be paid back and more times, I mean, by the rapeseed. We have other ongoing trials on the farm with oats varieties, wheat varieties, clover varieties in crossed trial. I have a plot on long-term continued cereal, cereal after cereal, and I'm changing just the varieties, but we are on the 4th year now on the clover. And as I said before, we will analyze the effect of the sheep grazing on the plots, seeing if we have a more favorable soil life microorganism on the field. That's all for the moment. Thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you, Nicolas. I hope everyone can hear me. Fascinating. That's really, really a good example of how it can be done. We have a couple of questions, Nicolas, if you'd like to. One of the questions really, I think it's a broader question. So if you get an answer, but also then perhaps the other two to join in as well. Can you explain really about the suitability of alfalfa versus white clover? And does it depend on the height of the cereal crop? But equally, there's been another question really about for those who are livestock farmers who have got a lot of clover in their rotations already with the grass blades and are concerned about too much clover in the rotation. Particularly, I think there are questions of nematodes and stuff. What other species are possible to be used in this living mulch concept to try and provide this weed control at the bottom? So the first question is alfalfa or clover, and then on for other varieties that you might consider using.
Yes, alfalfa and clover. Alfalfa for us is the champion of the biomass production, but on slightly acid soils, we sometimes struggle to establish it properly, and we only have one chance. It's in the spring to establish at the end of March. With such a big area and such a few rains, we cannot miss. So when we try with what's working. Clover is producing a little bit less biomass and finally nitrogen, but it's way more drought resistant in the first stage, and also water resistant. I say waterproof. Alfalfa is very sensible to a little bit excess of moisture. So we mostly struggle with alfalfa establishment setting up in the fields. And on the other hand, when it's growing, it's invading everything. So it's not easy to manage, not easy to control, if it's really possible to control. I mean, Clive was speaking about cutting the interrows between the cereals. I think it will be the only way to introduce alfalfa in the system. We tried very special alfalfa varieties with very long wintering time, the longest winterizing period. Even like that, they were about to win the drag race cereals in the spring. So I prefer a little bit less performance of the legume using dwarf and semi-dwarf white clover than the very performing legumes that sometimes win the battle.
Right. And Mark and Clive, any other thoughts?
Yeah, if I could just add, really, I think if there's two kind of key mechanization changes or challenges that are going to be essential to make this work on a practical broad acre kind of basis. The first is the move to the wider row spacing of drilling. We drill everything on a 250 mil, 25 centimeter spacing. That's not usual. You know, certainly in UK producers, most cereal growers would be growing on narrower row spacings than that. And Nicolas mentioned he was on that similar 25 centimeter row spacing. The reason I think that's going to be necessary is because I think the component, the mechanical change that's currently missing is, I think, really, regardless of alfalfa or the clover varieties we're using, I think it's going to be essential to be able to inter-row mow these crops to stop the clover or alfalfa, in Nicolas's case, swamping out and competing. I also, from what I've been told so far, I think that the mowing, the constant mulching of a clover mimics a grazing effect, which I believe agronomically is what will allow the clover to start to release the nitrogen that it's fixed from the atmosphere and make it then available to the plant. So I think when that kind of mechanization becomes available, I could see a situation where we are almost continually going through the crop, inter-row mowing, mulching the clover or alfalfa between the rows. And looking long-term ahead, I mean, this is something that, to my mind, potentially could get quite exciting as machinery gets smaller and robots become more involved in large-scale agriculture. I've got a robotic lawnmower at home. It's the only kind of a bit of robotic equipment on the farm. But to my mind, making these inter-row mulching, mowing machines, fully autonomous robotic machines, very small, so not necessarily talking about using tractors. We could be using renewable energy to be powering them potentially as well. So I think there's some quite interesting opportunities there, but the machinery and the mechanization, we're a bit ahead of it, I think, at the moment, but that's what would make this a lot easier.
Yeah, the small robot co has commented on the chat line already, and there's some underground agriculture, I think, doing some really, really fascinating stuff in Europe and America. Mark, any comments or?
Well, rather worryingly, I'm going completely the other way, which is I'm not feeling very confident now. We've had wide rows, we've had narrow rows on organic, we've sort of done everything. We found with wider rows, we could hoe in those cases. It's obviously not talking about living mulch there, but we got more weeds. Where there is more light, there is more water, you get more weeds. So we are on the cycle of going for closer row spacings. I'm looking for ever closer row spacings. The drill I've just ordered is a 150 mil 6-inch spacing row, and I'd be happy to go narrower than that. We, in our general cropping elsewhere, I very much support the idea of close row spacings for crop competition. And we don't get the tillering without nitrogen. We need the plants, and to have wider row spacings for us has made weed control more difficult. We are pursuing narrow rows with harrowing rather than wide rows with hoeing. And I take that forward into the living mulch. I think we need to hold the mulch down through crop competition, is my theory on this. And the closer row spacing, for me, is the way to do that. For that reason, we're not looking at mowing. And for that reason, the white clover is critical, really, for me. The availability of the micro wild type white clover seed. We grow red clover. We can't grow lucerne because of pH. So I've never grown that, but we do grow a lot of red clover for seed production or silage production. And I would not be brave enough to use anything other than white. And I don't think anything other than micro white in this way at this stage. Drag race is a brilliant way of putting it, Nicolas. That's exactly what we're going to have. We haven't done it yet. I am both excited and dreading the spring in a way to see what's going to happen, because there's nothing we can do really to influence either crop. They're on their own now, and it's whether those winter cereals can get ahead and stay ahead of the clover. But for me, the crop competition, suppressing the clover will be key.
It's interesting. I think the fundamental difference in attitude towards the weed burden between me, the conventional farmer, and Mark and Nicolas, the organic farmers. And that's the key reason that I can't go organic, because the lack of soil disturbance, what no-till has done for me, by only farming the surface of the soil rather than trying to farm 10 inches or so, whatever we bring up with cultivators, it's reduced my the weed seed bank I'm trying to deal with. So broadleaf weeds and grass weeds are really just not a big issue here. 15 years ago, I'd be using autumn herbicides and then follow up spring herbicides. Now we drill fields in the autumn, shut the gate, and they won't see a herbicide till kind of a late spring herbicide. So that just demonstrates how there's some of the gains you get with the organic. I would lose if I lost at the moment. If I went organic and started to cultivate again, I would suddenly have a much higher weed burden, clearly, like Mark and Nicolas have to deal with.
I think we all know there's, with an organic world, this is a big debate anyway. There's certainly one very big organic cereal farmer in the south of England who doesn't use any form of cultivation. She cultivates, but she doesn't use a hoe at all. So in order to not have disturbance in the spring, and weed control is through crop population, which is what Mark's talking about. So we have this debate within organic farming as it is at the moment. So it's just extending it into bringing the conventional guys into the same question. There have been two questions, and I think I know the answer to one. Yes, Clive, you do use glyphosate, but the question has come about: have you had any problem with residual herbicides, and actually, do you use any residuals in the autumn? And there was also a question as whether this would work with the blackgrass situation, which in the UK, blackgrass is the biggest problem in areas of organic of conventional arable farming. It's not a widespread across the whole UK, but it's getting worse. So residual fertilizers, Clive.
Yeah, residual herbicides. Yeah, I mean, I try to avoid them as much as I can, because in a no-tillage situation, regardless of this living mulch type situation, there's always a danger of them hanging around longer than we want them to. So I try to avoid residuals and tend to use more contact products wherever possible. However, that's not always possible. So there are crops where I'm using residual herbicides in there. It's a concern, but the gap is quite long usually between when that would be used and that next crop's going in. When our our clover didn't establish well this spring and early summer, other than the blaming of this very hot, dry period that just wasn't very conducive to germination or getting it going, we did start to ask questions within the group here. Could it be residual? When did the field last have a residual herbicide applied? And looking back at the cropping history on that particular field, it was actually nearly 2 years in a crop of oilseed rape that had a curb propyzamide application. So it was such a long time that we thought, no, that can't possibly be the case. However, James Alexander is another guy involved in this trial. He is running part of his farm is organic and part of his farm is conventional. And he suffered similar very dry conditions as we did. And interestingly, on his conventional area, his clover was a failure. He didn't get it to germinate and get away and create a crop. But on his organic area, it did. So that makes me wonder a lot more again, is the residual herbicide a problem? And actually, that rings alarm bells in my head that I don't really want. It makes me even more determined to not want to continue to use products if they really are hanging around in the soil and having an effect for that long. If it really, some of these things really can still be causing issues 2 years down the line, that's a bit of a light bulb moment there for me. But I think it's probably more likely due to the drier conditions, because it was quite extreme here this spring and early summer, and not the residuals. But it's certainly a consideration. But I think in a more normal year with some moisture, I really should be able to get the clover to establish well. I've never had trouble establishing any other crop, particularly, or had intercropping issues with residuals before between different points in the rotation.
Okay. Thank you, Nicolas. Just as we've had a question about whether you use any other, what was the actual question? Do you use any organic inputs for the soil? But equally, a second question, which relates a little bit back to the UK situation, is are there any particular annual weed issues that you have on your farms? We have blackgrass, particularly as a really, really pernicious weed.
Yeah, I know the blackgrass situation in UK. We do have also blackgrass. Sherlocks have one of the biggest issue, and but we are mostly I'll say invaded by spring type weeds, like weeds from South Europe, like ambrosia, xanthium. I don't think you know them in UK, or maybe a few.
Don't think so.
You have enough with blackgrass, I think. You don't need them. But we used to have blackgrass, and blackgrass appears where we have a rich soil, so where we have fertility. I used to say no nitrogen, no problems. When the soil is very poor, even the weeds doesn't grow. I mean, no, but this is one of the main problems after a rich lay of clover. The blackgrass is coming back very fast.
Yeah.
From my point of view, the no-till has been quite instrumental in getting rid of our grassweed problems over the last decade or so. Not just blackgrass, but brome and meadowgrasses and all grass weeds. And again, the other reason I don't want to cultivate again, because I know what lies beneath the surface of my soil. If I ploughed the whole farm tomorrow, I would just plough up a brand spanking new blackgrass problem and brome problem and meadowgrass and ryegrass problem. It's all still down there, but it's tucked away out of the way. Hence why I'd be scared to cultivate now for that reason alone. I'd be putting myself back to where I would have been a decade or so ago.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I got to check my cribs. So we have a question, actually, I think maybe reflects a little bit on that as well. Do you think weeds are an index of what is wrong with soil? It's a much broader question, and obviously one of the arguments behind the regen conservation ag no-till is that if we can get our soil back to its much more natural state, and organic farmers, Mark's particularly for such a long-term organic, we have much more natural biology. Are weeds indicators of a problem in the background? And therefore no-till is a solution.
I would love to say, I'd love to say after 20 years organic soil improvement, we were reducing weeds, but it's not the case. I'm afraid. So I really, honestly, I don't know, but my experience is all I do know. And as I said earlier, I think weeds, charlock is our biggest problem, as Nicola said. And the problem with brassica weeds like charlock is that the seeding is so prolific. One of the reasons we went away from hoeing on a wide row system was that there were sufficient charlock plants growing within the row and therefore not being hoed out to return huge quantities of seed. So we went back to a closer row with a harrow rather than hoeing, largely for that reason. So at least when you're harrowing, it may not be perfect, it's very far from perfect, but we do harrow 100% of the soil in the field. So we can, in theory, achieve better control of very prolific weeds like charlock. But no, I really can't answer the question other than my own experience, and that's that I am proud of our soil. I feel, none of us are doing everything right. We're all doing things that are right and doing things that are wrong. And I personally feel we're doing more right than wrong. And I think that's reflected in our soil, both in terms of analysis and in practical reality. We could do a lot better, but I think our soils are pretty good, but we've still got a lot of weeds, I'm afraid.
I'm quite a big believer in that what weeds you get is actually telling you what your soil wants to grow. If your soil that grows lots of grass weeds actually tends to be quite good wheat ground because it obviously is suited to grasses. A great example of that is we grow a spring companion crop that we call piola, which is a companion crop, a pea and oilseed rape mixed together, growing together as a companion crop. When we grow that, we find that we need the peas proliferate in that mix for us. So if we slow a 50-50 kind of mix of those two seeds, we get a predominantly pea crop with some oilseed rape growing amongst it, and the function being to stop the peas falling over, making them easier to combine, and they grow better together as a companion. However, I know other farmers in other areas of the country that grow exactly the same piola crop type mix on different soil types, but in their case, the oilseed rape dominates and they just have a few peas in the crop. So I think that what that's telling me is that my soils are better suited to growing a crop like peas than they are an oilseed rape. Whereas for the farmer in Kent, I know, who tends to get more oilseed rape than peas, his soil type is clearly keener to grow the oilseed rape. So I think it's the same with weeds. It's our soil telling us what we should be growing, probably.
Another point that has also just been made, and again, this is from Jane Cooper, absolutely superb. We've got to redefine what a weed is. We've also got, and we as organic farmers have a tolerance of weeds, which I think the modern conventional farmer has a more tolerant attitude to the odd weed in the field, whereas I can remember a local farmer who insisted on spraying with wild oat spray every year because one wild oat, which he could have walked into the field and pulled up, would be assigned to him of being a failure. Whereas in today's world, I think we accept that we can have weeds, and if you can keep them at rogable levels, it's a little bit of work, but it's good. So it's a very interesting discussion. And we also are bearing in mind that the other function that provision by what we call weeds, and one of the things we're providing by having these living mulches will be flowers in the clover plants later on in the year. So we're adding biodiversity, we're adding and providing for the pollinators. And so very low levels of weed at a low level. We're getting down to the end of the question. We're getting close to the end of time, and I'm aware that we've been on here for 75 minutes, and it's a long time sitting looking at a screen unless you're used to it. I think in that case, I might just call it a day at this point. Thank you all for your input and for your time, particularly Clive, Mark and Nicolas for giving up time, spending a bit of time thinking about what they're going to. Nicolas, particularly thank you for letting me chase you around the Europe to try and get you to come and to do this session. Thank you for ORFC for giving us the opportunity to have this discussion. Thank you to Anya, who's in the background been moderating the whole thing in the background and making sure everyone's been let in, and hopefully we've matched things through. And also thank everybody who has made the effort. There were over 330 people on at one point in this thing. So that's an absolute brilliant example of the way that we can use these webinars to inform. And so thank you three for speaking. Thank you everyone for coming, and hope you have a really good rest of the day and come to as many sessions through the rest of the conference as you can. So thank you very much.